Welcome to Talkin Science. I'm Matt Miller in Studio 4. Dr. Brad Tucker is here. Brad, happy Tuesday.
Yeah, how's it going?
Doing well, my friend, doing well. Let's get the headlines in the 19th week of 2021. China continues its string of red planet firsts, launching, orbiting, and now landing on Mars. A very different space race. A Russian film is set to head to the space station in the same month as Tom Cruise. And hearing things, Voyager One detects the universe as it continues on its journey away from Earth. Brad, school talks are back on. You're out in Orange today.
Yeah, we were in Cowra yesterday and back into Orange, so it's good to get back and see some kids and talk about all the amazing things that are happening in space that weren't even happening 2 weeks ago, and how fast it's moving, which is always exciting.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into the show, a quick reminder of the socials. We can find you on Twitter at btucker22. I'm on Twitter at Miramat86, and of course, Trekzone exclusively on Twitter. Plus, find our YouTube channel for the latest eps and on your podcast app of choice, and not forgetting the website, trekzone.org. 18 years on the web this year. Brad, kicking off the show, RocketLabs' 20th launch has ended in an anomaly. Payload and second stage lost, but the experiment to return stage one completed successfully.
It was a disappointment, obviously, to the satellites on board and what happened. But, like lots of these groups and RocketLabs in particular, they get up, they learn, they adapt, and then they go again. And as you said, there was also that plus of recovering the booster, which has been one of their big goals that they've done now a couple times, and trying more innovative techniques to recover it. So, it's a win, but obviously you hate to see the second stage and the satellites that were on board not make it.
A planet hot enough to vaporize metal has been confirmed by USQ researchers, Brad.
Yeah, another one of these really close exoplanets, one of these hot Jupiters, as they're called. So, it's essentially like a Jupiter, very close to its star, so it's hot. But because they're so nearby and so big, the normal atmosphere, the normal thing exists. So when you have a hot enough planet or that close, your solids become liquids or gases. And yes, you can melt metal. So it's a very different idea of a planet than kind of the ones that we're used to in our own solar system.
All righty, Brad, let's dive into the stories this week. And China has continued its feat of firsts, red planet firsts, in fact. The first mission has landed on the surface. This is a pretty cool feat.
Yeah, we've kind of been waiting to take place on Tianwen-1. To the surface, and it was great that it actually happened. It's as we've talked about before, it's really hard to land on Mars. It is really tricky. Others have tried, and it hasn't necessarily worked as well. And the fact that they got it essentially on their first go or in their first try is really impressive in terms of a feat. And more than just that they did it, that it's so far apparently is working as according to plan. And they didn't have to do any last-minute adjust or changes. So it's a really big step, and well done to all the scientists and engineers on the mission.
Well, it seems like they learnt from other countries who've tried to land using a combination of a protective capsule, a parachute, and even a rocket platform to make the soft landing on the red planet's surface.
Yeah, and this is something that NASA, as you said, has done before, and other groups. The tricks when the Russians were really on Mars back in the 60s and 70s, they were the first to try it. Mars was first landed on by the Russians. And they had a lot of different methods they had to try in technology. And it's not that simple. And even if you kind of know the recipe, right? It's kind of like baking. Even if you know the recipe, it doesn't mean it's going to turn out well or tasty or work. And even if you know what you think is going to work, that doesn't mean it actually is going to work. But as you said, they tried a relatively tested method, and they nailed it.
Well, the Tianwen orbiter arrived at Mars in February and has spent some time since then surveying Utopia Planitia, the spot where Zhurong, the lander, and the rover eventually landed.
Yeah, and this, of images and detail from space to pinpoint and detail, as you said, where they're going to land. And look, that was an interesting move and a smart move. It takes a while to figure out where you're going to land. Because, even being different off by 500 meters, you could be landing in a crater, or you could be landing in the mountain or down a valley. If you think about on Earth, if you're off of a runway of an airplane by 100 meters, that could be disastrous. It's no different than on Mars. So it takes a long time to do it. And their landing site that they got was very near where their intended site was. So again, a great milestone or achievement for the team.
And it's also the spot where Viking 1 landed in 76. But like we've discussed before, there's still so much to learn, even by visiting very similar places.
And this, an exciting thing is that you can kind of now look to what we saw with Viking, potentially comparing it to today. Are there any minute changes? They're probably minor. But really, there's such exploration due, and it is in a very different spot than Perseverance, and it will do slightly different related science. And so now I think the biggest question is how long can they get out of their rover? They're intending it for 90 sols, 90 Martian days, like most of the NASA designs have done before. But as we've also seen with, say, Spirit and Opportunity and Curiosity, even though they were only designed for a few months, they went for years. So here's hoping that not only do they get their 90 days, but also their multiple years out of it.
Well, Brad, next up, Russia is set to reignite the space race with America, but in a very different theatre. That's a pun. Movie theatre.
Yeah, look, this is you can't fall. This is hilarious. It's one of these things of how quickly space is headed. We talked about when Tom Cruise announced that he'd signed a contract to go or signed an agreement, film the first movie in space. And SpaceX was happy to give him a ride. NASA was happy with it. And then, of course, the Russians turn around and say, well, capsule, we can send people into space. Why don't we film a movie in space? And we could do it before Tom Cruise, and we can make it focused on the Russian Space Agency and history and how much cool things Russia's doing in space. And it's just a very different space race, but one that is all too real.
Well, Yulia Pereslid and director Klim Shipenko from Russia will travel in October to film the movie called Challenge, as you say, about the history of Roscosmos, which is being produced by the Russian Space Agency and local TV network Channel One in Russia.
And what's really cool with this is you actually talked to Mark on his space station earlier flight. In fact, they did some rearranging because in order to accommodate them on the Soyuz, they had to bump one of the seats. And of course, they're not going to bump the Russians, so they bumped the Americans off of it. There's been immense shuffling of seats in order to accommodate this. And this is the reality of what you can do now in space. We've talked about private people and things happening in space, and now it is most definitely in the here and now with this mission. In a very different way. We talk about the costs are becoming cheaper, so it is now cheaper to go into space to make the movie about going to space to fake it.
Well, Tom Cruise's mission is slated for the same month, so a possibility exists, especially with SpaceX backing him, that they could launch at the same time, and that'd be a very interesting conundrum that I don't think anyone could have seen coming in the 20-year history of the space station.
No, and look, and it's also clear now if Tom Cruise will go into that October launch or to a later launch in years, the Russians may end up beating the Americans, the first movie in space. But yeah, the fact that there is this potential that two different movie crews could be two different movies in space. Could you have predicted this in the 60s with the race to the moon? You can't make this stuff up. And this is kind of, I think it just highlights how fast the world is changing. If we talked about 5 years ago, this race into space for movies, okay, maybe, but who knows if it's going to happen and when. The fact that you could have two filming and overlapping schedules around the same time, mind-boggling.
Absolutely. Well, lastly this week, Brad, Voyager One, out in the cold, dark depths of interstellar space, has detected thermally excited plasma oscillations that we can hear.
This is always a really cool discovery. Voyager has been doing a lot, as we've talked about. The fact that it is hearing this background hum or the background noise of the emptiness of space is cool. This idea that even seemingly interstellar space, where there isn't a lot, there is what we call the interstellar medium, this background plasma. The fact that we can detect not necessarily its effects, but its frequencies and what the physics of it is happening, it's just one of those, it just highlights one of those discoveries. You just never thought that Voyager would not only last that long, but also do this. And in a really amazing feat from Voyager to be able to detect it, this very faint light, and survive long enough to do it.
Well, this could lead to a better understanding of the heliopause that surrounds our solar system, specifically how the interstellar environment shapes it.
Yeah, because this is the big thing when we talk about interstellar or Voyager leaving the space. Well, it's actually left the heliopause, rotationally solar system, attached in some ways, but it has left the heat bubble and the plasma bubble essentially from our sun. And we do know there is an interstellar medium. There's a lot of people that work on this. There isn't just nothing in space. There is stuff. And the fact that you can see and potentially detect the interactions, the limits, and directly probe the interstellar medium in a way, again, we just never really thought, it is an exciting opportunity for understanding the stuff between stars and the stuff that actually makes up the main body of galaxies.
Well, an incredible fact I read while researching this one, Brad, is that Voyager 1 is 14 billion miles from Earth and its transmit strength is only 160 bits per second, which is 0.16 kilobytes. Now, bear with me here, stretch the imagination with me. If I were to transfer this video file from our recording today, which is around 7 gigabytes, it'd take me just over 11 years to transfer the file. But let's put it back into perspective and say that Voyager 1 is over 50 years old, so it's still incredible that we can hear from it 14 billion miles away.
I think it's incredible that you can detect this, that you can hear from this, and that it still works, and it detected something. That's the thing. The fact that it alone made a scientific discovery that was not really the intended purpose. And this just goes to show that sometimes with these experiments, you just, expect the unexpected. You just don't necessarily know what's going to happen from them. And it's remarkable that it is possible. Again, mind-boggling.
Well, will Voyager 1 ever be out of contact with us, Brad?
Well, at some point, it's going to run out of batteries at some point. And I guess at some point, it will go away, that 70-meter dish at Tidbinbilla and at Goldstone. The NASA tracking station can't pick that up. I think everyone thinks that the probe will die or reaches the limit of us being able to pick it up. So it's trying to juice it for all its life, so to speak.
Well, just before we go, Brad, a look ahead to this week's Talkin Science interview. Jonathan McDowell will be back to chat about RocketLabs Failure over the weekend. Jonathan, a reminder that launching into space is hard, with RocketLabs' 20th launch a failure.
Yeah, so this is the third failure in 20 launches that RocketLab have had, which is, it's a little higher than you'd like, but I have confidence that RocketLab is going to fix this problem quickly.
That interview will be out on Thursday at 12:30 p.m. GMT. Or if you're watching us in the future, click the card in the top right of the video. Or indeed, follow the links to our website at Trekzone.org. Brad, great to pick apart the stories of the week with you. Get back to those kids. They're looking forward to another classroom talk. We're going to catch you again next week.
Yeah, look, the fact that I'm talking about Tom Cruise in space, I who never would have thought about that. We'll see what next week holds.
Keep up to date with Twitter. Catch new podcasts daily on YouTube. Plus, we're beaming to your favorite podcast app 5 days a week. Just search for Trekzone and subscribe.